on the air. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Hangout. We've got just a handful of us in here right now. Ann Kelly, Barry Adams, Steve Bonin, Terry Van Horn, Tim Colling, and myself. So why don't we go and let everybody introduce yourself and tell us what you've been doing this week. Ann, you want to start? Oh, she's on a phone call. Okay, we'll go to Barry. He's not as pretty as Ann, but...
That's an understatement right there. Everyone, I'm Barry Adams. I haven't been part of this for a very, very long time, but I thought, hey, I've got a Friday afternoon/evening off. Let's pop in and say hi to these old curmudgeons like Doc and Terry and everybody else. So, and anybody who knows me knows I like to share my opinions, even if they're wrong, usually with a lot of profanity when I'm at it anyway.
Good way to get everybody's attention. Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Bonin, Harris Web Creative. This week, I've been doing video for the first time in probably 18 months or so. And boy, editing video, that can eat up your time budget in the blink of an eye, and your days are gone. So that's me this week.
Terry, what have you been up to?
Oh, making clients confused. That's my main business. Keep them confused. Other people say educate them. I just want them to let me do my job. I have one client like that. Great. I'll have them till I go to the grave. But at the end of the year, that'll be my only client for sure. Want to do some other things. This week, I've been preparing some work on a community with this company, and they're in the office space business. Another business I'm becoming more interested in as I look at it. It reminds me a bit of when I got into the internet, a business that was going to grow and nobody actually saw where it was going to go.
Nice to get on the ground floor or something like that.
Yeah.
Tim,
that's
how about you?
The way always, right?
Yeah.
Think of the keywords before somebody else and you own them for a while anyhow.
Make the other guy play catch up instead of you.
Yep.
Mr. Colling.
Hey, I'm Tim Colling. I own a Servant's Heart Web Design and Marketing, and primarily work in the healthcare space, and particularly with home delivery of healthcare services. A lot of local SEO work. And this week, what have I been doing? I've actually looked very closely at moving all of my client sites to another hosting service because my current one raised their prices. And however, the new one that I was looking at clobbered my business debit card with 305 attempts to charge it. And the first few were successful, and then my bank shut down that card. So now I have to replace, they're going to replace it, and I have to change all my subscriptions everywhere. So yeah, it's been an interesting week. Did a little work for clients too along the way, but that's what I've been up to.
Lovely. Yeah, that's always makes for an interesting day.
Yes.
Hey, Doc. Dave gave the list of topics, but I've been following Barry for a while, and I always have a few questions for him. I know he did some research on something that me and Dave have looked at as well, is faceted menus and that kind of nonsense. I know you did some research on that a little while back, right, Barry?
Yeah, well, research is maybe a strong word.
Okay.
I get paid to fix clusterfucks on client websites, and often those clusterfucks originate from faceted navigation problems. you always try to find the most elegant solution to those sorts of problems, and they can be quite challenging sometimes because some facets have inherent SEO value, whereas others don't, and you have to be able to work within the constraints of a platform, which doesn't always allow you to be very selective in which facets you want to be crawlable and indexable and which ones you don't. And then, of course, some platforms like Magento allow you to build all kinds of combinations of facets depending on how they're set up, and it can become an absolute nightmare very, very quickly. I was once working with the website that sold less than 5,000 products, and they had more than 8 million pages in Google's index because of that faceted navigation problem. And that's an interesting knot trying to untangle.
Yeah.
And that's from all the cross-referencing, right?
All the different attributes,
Filters.
different products, different types of products by price, by brand, by color, by size, you name it, and all the different combinations are possible. I mean, those 8 million was just the tip of the iceberg, really, because you do some calculations of the back of a napkin. Theoretically, there could have been billions of URLs crawlable.
Oh yeah, I've seen some real. One, I was looking at working for a client in e-commerce. And he said to me, look at, I brought to his attention that his competitor had so many more pages in the index than he did. And how he was doing it was like that. But you can do that and have it work too. It's not that it's wrong, right? The main thing is having it canonical on the item page, correct?
Canonical tags help to a certain extent, but it doesn't solve the crawl problem. I mean, when you're talking about that sort of a scale, 8, 10, 12 million pages, crawl budget becomes a problem. And you need to use robots like TXT blocking and well equals no follow rules to prevent search engines from crawling all those different facets. If you're talking a couple of 100,000 URLs, a canonical tag tends to be more than sufficient to solve that. And also especially if it's driven by URL parameters,
right?
Just using Search Console to tell Google what each of those parameters does is usually more than enough of a fix. You don't need to do all kinds of hacks to make it work. But the more facets you have, the bigger the problem becomes.
Right.
And you have to start managing how Google crawls those, because there's a real chance that it spends so much time crawling all those facets if it doesn't recognize them as facets, they're just filter mechanisms. And then never spends time crawling and indexing the pages you actually want the search engine to crawl in.
And then you get the CMSs that build a different URL path to each one.
Yes.
That's where you get the big pages. And
That's fun.
yeah, you have to really watch that stuff. When I read what you wrote on that, and it caught my attention. Of course, I've been slowly telling people, you know what, on your homepage, instead of having all these links to all these categories, why don't you write about each one on the homepage? That eliminates the problem of having so much lost link equity being passed from the homepage, which gets the majority of the links, or should be. So I want to keep as much of that page equity to pass on, because most of the search engines use that to some point. So and plus, when you have a link in context, I believe that it's more valuable to Google. In other words, they're going to pay more attention because they better understand what that link is about.
Yeah, you have to sometimes really work hard to get link value from the homepage to the right pages deeper on the website that have ranking potential for long tail queries or very specific search terms. And a very deep site structure doesn't really help, but you can't throw thousands of links on a single page either, because that just messes the whole thing up. So sometimes you have to work with least bad scenarios especially with large-scale websites, and use the occasional trick, like have a box on the homepage with manually updatable links, as in these are the hot topics of the day, or these are the hot products, to give those sort of temporary boosts to products or categories or service pages, or even news articles for my news clients. So, you know, it's
over here, she's building a web page over here and destroying all of your legends over here.
having some background noise with Anne.
Sorry, guys.
Well, while we got you here, Barry, you did something recently too. You wrote a piece over on State of Digital about AMP. But,
yeah.
something that looked like it was going to possibly really have a major effect, and I agree. I would love to see that just make AMP obsolete. They're talking about going to preloading and pre-rendering outside of AMP. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's an interesting development in a way, because if that does actually happen, you don't have to adhere to AMP standards anymore to get all the benefits, and you can just build fully optimized mobile experiences and still get the same benefits from Google search, at least, that preloading gives currently only to AMP. The downside to a certain extent is that you do have to work within the framework that Google supports for these sorts of pages. And while it's not completely AMP, it is quite a restrictive framework anyway. You know, it's not like, oh, we can just insert a meta tag and voila, our pages are mobile optimized and Google will start preloading us. It is actually quite restrictive, and you need very smart web developers to build your website in the right way to actually trigger that sort of a tick box. So it's nice for Google to make that announcement, because it sort of diffuses any criticism that people have been leveraging against AMP, that it's sort of a cheating way to speed up web pages, because AMP pages aren't inherently faster on their own merit. It's just because of the preloading and pre-rendering that Google browsers do with AMP, you get that very fast instantaneous load experience. So it sort of diffuses that particular criticism, but on the other hand, because of the complication of implementing it, it doesn't actually help a lot of websites. In fact, I'd be very surprised if there's even a single website out there at the moment, a proper, you know, high traffic, high volume website that would match that particular restriction that Google puts on it.
Yeah, I was wondering about that when I read your piece, Barry. I was wondering, could this just be a diversionary tactic? Because so many people are pissed off about the fact that they're showing my content and it's not even on my site. Is this just a way to be able to say, look, we've offered you guys 2 different ways to do this and you're not implementing it on scale, so we're going to decide what we're going to do.
Yeah,
it took a lot of heat off.
It did, and I think it's a really clever way actually to diffuse any legal ramifications as well, because there's a very strong case to be made at the moment that AMP is again Google favoring its own technology against other technologies, because let's be honest, AMP is a Google project. 90% plus of all the code commits on AMP are by Google employees. You know, it's in Google in all but name. So this new revelation, this new announcement, sort of allows Google that get out of jail card and says, you know what, it's for everybody. It's not just AMP. You can do whatever you want as long as you adhere to regular web standards, because they are talking about proper W3C web standards that your website needs to adhere to. It sort of diffuses any criticism right off the bat, you know.
Yeah, but that brings up another point too. Their AMP is about as far away from W3C standards as you can get.
Yeah, exactly.
And a standard AMP page will throw more than 100 errors. So I could see them running into real issues very early on in the EU.
Yeah, I think this is a very good way for them to get the W3C people themselves on board, you know, by saying, yes, these are W3C standards and we'll give it the same performance boost as we give to our own standard, or, you know, the unofficial Google standard that is AMP. So it's a nice announcement, but I don't think it changes anything in the short to medium term. AMP is still going to be an extra overhead for websites. It's going to be difficult to implement. And you're going to have to make that decision whether you want to put your effort into creating AMP versions of your website or just building the fastest possible mobile experience that you can.
Can I ask a question? I'm just so that I understand, because I don't really know AMP really well. You said preloading. So if you have this AMP site, what is Google preloading? Is it preloading an environment into an Android browser before you actually go to the site, or what's it doing?
Yes, when you get a mobile search result from Google in a Google browser, be it Chrome on iOS or on Android, but specifically on Android,
right?
The AMP articles in the carousel are preloaded in the background in the top stories carousel. So the moment you then, as a user, tap on those stories, they load instantly because they've already been loaded in the background.
Oh.
And Google can do that because those articles that Google is preloading, it's not actually preloading from those websites, it's preloading them from the Google AMP cache. Those article pages are cached in the Google AMP cache. So Google can instantly load them from that cache in the background because it knows these are completely valid articles. It doesn't have to do a lot of heavy lifting with CPU cycles and memory to make that happen. And that's why AMP feels so very, very fast. That's why you have below 1 second load times, almost instantaneous load times, because the load work is already being done even before you tap on the article on the story in the first place.
So what about
almost like a version of AOL?
Right. What about the organic links on any SERP? They're not preloaded.
No, so far as I know, it's only the top stories carousel that preloads those at the moment.
So if you happen to have an AMP page and you're in position 3, there's no real advantage to you.
Well, you get the AMP icon, and I think
right.
What we're starting to see now is users subconsciously, perhaps even without knowing what the icon means, starting to associate that with speed because of the same icon being there in the top stories carousel. I noticed this even myself when I scroll through mobile search results. I see the AMP icon. I'm actually slightly more inclined to click on it because I know it's probably going to be a fast page. Plus, it's not going to have an awful lot of JavaScript tracking technologies in there because AMP restricts a lot of that in the standard. So I think Google is being very clever with that AMP icon and subconsciously training its users to tap on those icons so that you get the benefit of extra traffic. Even if you're not necessarily sure why you're starting to prefer search results with that little icon versus the ones that don't have it.
Sounds like the Stepford Wives.
Behavioral conditioning, that's what it is.
Can I ask a question about the faceted navigation? What's the downside of no indexing one of the facets, say the color red? So something like shirts is much more important than the color red, but if you just no index that whole line with red in it.
Yeah, of course, you lose any ranking power for those specific longer tail search queries. Someone searching for a red shirt, your page is not going to show up for that because it's been no indexed. Plus, you have to be very careful with how you manage that, because if there are products below that blocked, that no indexed facet, you risk them not being called very often anymore. I mean, Google themselves not that long ago said that if you no index a page for a long time, they just deprioritize it in the call queue and just stop calling the deeper pages under it as well. So you lose the ranking value of that page, plus you lose any ranking value that the deeper pages might have built up. So you have to manage that very, very carefully and make sure that if you start limiting crawlers' access to your website to manage that faceted navigation sprawl, you don't limit the access to those product pages plus the facets that have actual ranking power.
I have found when I've been cleaning up sites that have been hit by Panda and others that, geez, a lot of them had a lot of no index pages. I think Google has like a quality score for sites. And if you've got 1 million pages and 100,000 of them are, 10% is no index, they wonder about the quality of the site. Like, why have pages that you don't want them to index but you'll have them there for
Yeah, I think
customer.
it's a bit more nuanced than that. I think it does have to do with page rank and link value, but basically what happens with no index pages, they become black holes for link value. Any links you send to a page that is meta no indexed, that's sort of, you might as well have a new follow link on all those links, because the link value to those pages linked from that new index page also start to lose value because the page just isn't crawled very often anymore. So it's all an add-on effect of having no index page, which the Google says, right, let's deprioritize the crawling of this page. And because of that deprioritization, the links on that page aren't being followed as often anymore. So they drop out of the link graph, and you have this all snowball effect that those pages, as well as the new index page, just lose all link value and lose all ranking power.
I think they lose some link equity, but I think Google knows about every link that was ever created. I don't think they lose track of anything.
Oh no, they remember everything. They've got a very long memory. That's why they had to implement the disavow tool, didn't they?
The other thing you mentioned, and I've never really seen this, but I've never had to deal with this, is you can go to Webmaster Tools and you can indicate there that this is a facet. Is that what you were saying?
If you use URL parameters to generate facets on your website, you can go to Search Console and tell Google what each parameter actually does. Does it sort, does it filter, does it paginate, etc., etc. And Google will then use that to decide which pages it should crawl very often and which ones it shouldn't. But that only works if facet navigation is built on the website using parameters in the URL.
Right, but I use that parameters tool, Barry, on sorts and all that kind of on an e-commerce site where you can filter all this stuff. I use it there quite often.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely have to do that.
And when you say parameters,
developing a website that was going to use that faceted menu, I would use parameters to do it because you have more control over it that way.
And when you say parameters, you mean question mark, parameter and parameter and parameter, like that?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
It's a value equals pair.
Right, right.
Attribute equals X, page equals Y, and equals Z behind the question mark in the URL.
I used to think that Google put emphasis on that for keywords. I used to put parameters in everything.
Well, it is a good way to put keywords directly into URLs, because they are part of the URL. So it does help with the relevance of that particular URL. I think that still works to a certain extent.
Oh, when you're dealing with entities, you could make it dance. I see Barry's eyes sparkling. I just give him Nice to see you again, Barry.
Yeah, I missed you guys, man. It's been years.
Working on news sites?
Yeah, most of them, half of my clients, I think, now are news clients. It's a nice little specialty to have, Most people who do specialized SEO for news publishers tend to work in-house at news publishers. And there's not an awful lot of people with news SEO experience who work freelance or agency side. So it's a nice little niche to have.
Yeah, I got one in the other week, first time. I'm proud of myself.
You need any help, just give me a shout.
You were going to be next call if I didn't get there.
Okay,
What did
well,
you think of the cleanup that they had a while back?
Yeah, that was an interesting one because they kicked a lot of websites out of the Google News Index, especially fake news and low-quality news sites. But at the same time, they said they had a technical problem and kicked a lot of valid news websites out of the index as well, including two of my clients. And both of those clients are how to put this mildly, very right-wing newspapers that have a slightly acrimonious relationship with Google. So they could very easily be accused of censoring the index for political reasons. So Google was very quick to act on that and put them right back into the index the same day with a big apology. Sorry, technical hiccup.
Does fake news mean that which Google disagrees with?
It might have been an overeager Google News engineer letting their own political perspectives get in the way of neutrality. I actually suspect that was the case.
Oh my.
Well, we're talking about news. How about CNN? They're going to revolutionize our industry now. They're offering a digital marketing, a 12-in-1 course training for what, $19.95?
$19.
Is that real? I didn't look at the link.
They're just selling leaks probably on CNN. That's it.
We just give up, guys. We're lost. We're doomed. They're going to take over. We just need to retire.
Yeah. Well, I'm 64 going on 5, so I'm almost there.
I'm nowhere near that. I got 15 years to go before I can think of retirement.
Really?
You and I are all, Terry, we're almost the same age. When's your birthday?
February 1st. Just turned 64.
I'll be 65 in May. So
I can start collecting my pension next year, next February.
And I'll be 66 in July, so bunch of kids.
Do you have a pension in the States, Doc?
I don't want it. It's just for what I would get, it's not worth the effort because they're just going to nibble away at it because of my income.
Right.
It's just not worth the hassle.
Yeah. See here.
If I find myself incapacitated, it might be different, but as long as I can still work and make a living, it's not worth going after.
Yeah. I'm just going to slow down. That's all.
I'm just happy to be able to go on Medicare and stop buying my own health insurance.
There you go.
That'll save me $12,000 a year.
I like living in Europe.
From that standpoint, sure. Yeah.
Did anybody catch
both here in Canada? Almost best of both worlds. Get by. So let's see.
So Terry, so next year, your medicinal cannabis, will they pay for that?
No, I wouldn't do that government crap anyways. That's like, I wouldn't waste my time with it. Oh man, it would. Wow. I could say something, but I'll just keep it.
Yeah, we have all our pharmaceuticals paid for after 65.
I'm looking forward to in June. I'll have plants growing here, man, for sure.
Oh yeah.
You won't need a green screen, Terry. You'll just have a wall of plants behind you.
I lived at a house where my buddy had a license to grow it, so I helped him out a little.
Product tester.
Well, and how to do it and germinate, do the whole 9 yards, take the clones, all of it, fertilize it. Yeah, lots of fun.
Yeah.
Since Bill Slosky didn't show up and he can't defend himself, let's throw his name out there in vain. He wrote a piece of it for anybody that hadn't already seen. I dropped the link in there in the chat. It's over on Go Fish Digital on ontologies. It's a really interesting piece. If you haven't seen it, I encourage it. But the other one, which this is a shame that Dave's not here to toss his 2 bits in. He got a little competition over there on Search Engine Journal. Somebody wrote about LSI.
Yeah.
However, it was a pretty lucid piece. Basically, the guy was just taking a piss at these idiots that are trying to sell LSI keywords.
Well,
But it was a good
people
piece.
just don't know any better, Doc.
It's just amazing to me. I went and read it when I saw it published, and you go through the comments, and 3 out of 5 people didn't even understand. They thought he was preaching the benefits of LSI keywords. I think, what are your reading comprehension skills get chopped out of the back of your mind? What?
Well,
but anyway, that's a fun read, though.
The concept behind LSI keywords is just co-occurrence, actually. So, you know, it's just they use the stupid thing to describe it. That's all.
Yeah, but it only is going to work on relatively small data sets. It's not going to scale, you know. So
Well, co-occurrence,
anyway,
well, you can take it. Google can take it across the whole of the internet if they want.
well, they could if they wanted to wait 30 seconds for a search result. Yeah.
No, well, it's all what you call it, packaged anyhow. Like the search results are actually compiled program. Didn't know that?
Yeah, but what I'm talking about is to go and match a particular query. LSI is just too slow to.
Oh yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. But the actual concepts that they're talking about are being used big time. It's just some, you know, some of these, for lack of a better word, warts or you know, I could call them idiots who, you know, pick up some words that were used incorrectly even the first time they were used. It was incorrect. The people who coined that term backed off of it a few years later because they're friends of mine. I actually have been at the altar of the LSI for a little while and believed in it. But what I was really looking at was the theming.
Well, no, the concept is certainly solid. It's just, you know, I think the guy that wrote the piece on Search Engine Journal said, you know, people just jumped on this because it had that magic word semantic. You know, everybody's looking for buzzwords they can hang their shingle on.
It's just like inbound marketing. You know, I hear that.
Yeah.
I have a pisser because, you know, to me, that's inbound calls to a call center. And anybody who's been in marketing for longer than a day, it's calls to a call center. You know, different response marketing. Yeah, it's kind of the same, but it just shows that the people in the industry are just lack any kind of innovative thinking. They have to go copy someone else. That's what 90% of them do. Then you got guys like Barry, and they can think of something different. Hey, Barry, I was wondering, have you noticed the disambiguation of the SERPs?
How do you mean?
I mean, if you put Jaguar in now, right? It knows the difference between a Jaguar and Jaguars, the football team. And down below the knowledge panel, it's got see results about. That's disambiguation. They actually know now. They figured out which entity is most searched for in that space. So if you do that search, you'll almost always get cars for Jaguar. And in the United States, you'll get the Jaguars football team for the plural, which is also important to note because Google wasn't really plural sensitive in the past.
No, I've seen some really interesting shifts in rankings on those sorts of relatively high volume generic terms in the last 6 months for different clients in different niches. And I think that has to do exactly with what you're saying, the disambiguation, Google understanding the entities better and personalizing those search results based on where you are, what it knows about you, etc. I mean, I do a search for Jaguar right now. I get the cars, obviously, plus I get the address of my nearest Jaguar dealer, and they're really nice cars. I'm a bit tempted, but my wife would kill me. It's good for users. For clients, it can be very hard to explain. I have a news client who used to rank really well for a fairly generic, high volume, very high volume search term, which was peripherally relevant for them, but it drove thousands and thousands of visits to their website. And then overnight, that just disappeared because Google got smarter and realized this is probably not the best possible search result. It's a slightly more nuanced search results depending on what they know about the person, where they are, etc., etc. And they went from several thousand visits a day to a couple of hundred visits a day because they lost all of that traffic. Now the traffic was very high bounce rate traffic anyway, but news publisher ad impressions, they don't care. They just want the ad impressions. They just want the page views, and it's very hard to explain to them that no, that traffic is not going to come back.
Right.
You're going to have to find other ways to capture that traffic.
I have some news for you. I work with office space clients, and as you know, there's a well-known movie called Office Space, where the disambiguation there, the box, see results about, was for office, the building. So office in a building. I lost a whole bunch of traffic because of that, because we were ranking very well for that. And when they made the change, that box appeared. That box has disappeared, and we started moving up in the rankings, which means they've realized that the movie, most people searching for Office Space are not looking for the movie. They're actually looking for office space.
That's a very good example of an evolving search space, because the people who love Office Space, the movie, let's be honest, we're getting a bit older and we're doing less of those searches and less, less inclined to look at that particular movie, even though it's one of my all-time favorites. That printer smashing scene is just epic on every level, and it's the reason why I always ask for a red stapler everywhere I go. But that's the example of an evolving search space, and Google adapting to people's intent that changes over time. So they're not fixed on one interpretation of a given query, but realize and probably have algorithmic ways of figuring out the intent behind the search and adjusting the richer search experience with knowledge graphs and related questions as people's behavior changes.
Yeah, I also found in that query space that it was a very localized query space up until about June or July of this year. All of a sudden, that don't really matter. I'm getting classified ad sites above us, aggregators that aren't even in Canada and have a worldwide directory and just happen to have a page for our city, which is, well, one of the bigger cities in North America. So, yeah, well, at any rate, it's been very interesting watching that. And the fact that I don't know if you've noticed it in the UK, this is something that we've been talking about in the dojo for a while, is how that localization is disappearing. Like now, even if I go and search the global index, google.com, I still get mostly Canadian results, almost the exact same results that I get from Canada. What good is that to me? If I've made the conscious choice to go to the google.com engine, I've said I don't want Canadian sites.
The reason they do that is because people travel a lot, and my default engine is google.co.uk, but I might be in very different countries. So Google will personalize it based on where it knows I am, rather than where I'm actually, what version of Google I'm actually using. So it's a bit of a pain in one sense, but I fully understand the reasons for doing it. I've always used VPNs anyway when I try to mimic search results in other locations, so it's never been really a problem for me to now have to do that on a broader scale. But yeah, Google will show you the local results regardless of which international version of Google you're actually using at any moment.
Yeah, one of the other things I noticed since June was all of a sudden we're ranking for terms in the google.com that we only ranked in the google.ca before. And we were starting to get traffic from all over the world on those same terms.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, especially since part of our business is offshore businesses getting an address at our business center.
Almost all of my clients are only concerned with local, but I can use the tool that I just put in the chat to simulate local results very, very easily.
The Bright Local tool is pretty good.
It is.
Yeah, you sent that to me, Tim, and I used that for my client who's selling through different states in the U.S. and it was very helpful.
Good.
And the results did change.
Yeah.
You know, between California, Texas, and Florida, the results definitely changed.
They'll even change based on zip code within the same city if you have a really huge city that has multiple zip codes.
Yeah, AWR has a program like that too, where you can go right down to zip code, but it's expensive, as you know.
Do you still use AWR?
Word nonsense, you know. Like,
do you still use AWR, Terry?
Yeah. Only the desktop version, wouldn't touch the cloud version with the 10-foot. Just too expensive. As soon as I see a company that charges me by the keyword, I just say, no, thank you. I wasn't born yesterday. These are a couple of X's and O's in a digital computer. It's not costing you nothing to store them. This is an idiot's way to charge people, overcharge people, just so you know. That's why I use a lot of tools like Link Prospector that charge you by the CPU, right? Like, I'm paying for what I use, which I find that's fair.
And I like that tool too.
Anything else? I don't know. When I have you here, Barry, I just want to keep asking you questions. You know, we don't see you enough anymore.
Go for it, man.
Well, how's the new business going for you? I was interested in that. I actually thought of you. We had a few people in we did our first Search Geeks. We took a hiatus for a few years.
Yeah.
And now we're starting it back up. We'll probably get you on one day too.
Absolutely, man.
But we did a Search Geeks on startups and people getting into the business. And you started 2-3 years ago?
Nearly 4 years ago now, actually, man.
Okay.
It'll be 4 years in April that I made the decision, and then 4 years in July when I actually properly went out on my own. And I'm unemployable now, you know. And it's having that conundrum at the moment. What do I hire staff and become a proper agency, or do we just keep it with me and the wife, which is what it is at the moment?
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Exactly, Tim. I mean, I'm staying with just me and the wife, and the thing is, I'm a person that doesn't like to say no when people come to me and ask me to work with them. So I have a huge queue of work, which is not a bad complaint to have. Let's be honest. You know, I'm not really complaining about it. It's just I need to get all this shit done, and I just don't have enough time. And I just enjoy spending time like right now chatting with you guys when I should actually be trying to write an audit and get it done out the door. But there's only so many productive hours I can work in a given day. I'm not one of those people who can do 10, 12-hour days and stay productive all throughout that. I've got about 6 or 7 hours of good time in a day when I can focus on something and get chugging. And then the battery's empty and I need to go home, have a drink, relax for a bit, watch some mind-numbingly dumb TV, and then go back at it. So there's a limit to how much I can get done. On the other hand, I've been following the advice of a lot of people who are in a similar boat to me and say, well, the easy solution is up your rates. Higher prices, you know, it's supply and demand. So I've been doing that, and I feel always a bit self-conscious when I do that, because you're like, right, this is actually a lot of money. Am I worth it? Is the quality of my output enough to warrant that sort of a price? You know, you start to have those sorts of doubts about that.
But that's not your question to ask, Barry. That's your clients. That's what should answer that question.
In my experience, the clients know they let you know if they think you're overcharging.
They may not be able to teach how to calculate ROI, but they can pretty much sense it.
Yeah.
Hey Barry. Hey Barry, what about being able to give part of those customers and those clients to someone else where you oversee the project, but somebody else actually does the implementation? So you're still client facing, but somebody else is doing the work to your level and your liking. That's how I would scale it.
The dojo is a good way to do that. also in Canada, because of the frickin' laws for workers, you're an idiot if you have employees. Because now, pretty soon I'm gonna have to give them 4%, for doing nothing, for coming into the job that I've given them, 4% bonus. Well, I decide the bonus, not the government telling me.
It's similar
That's
here
number
with mandatory pension
plus,
contributions and things like that.
yeah.
The thing is, though, the reason, at least I think the reason I'm doing so well as a business is because people buy me and they know it's not going to be an outsourcer, it's not going to be a junior person. And the only reason I could expand, like the way you say, Anne, and guarantee the quality if it is absolutely somebody who I know does awesome work. And they're very hard to find, and they tend to be very full with work anyway. You could always hire like a trainee and train them up, but then you're not going to hang on to an employee for very long.
Or you create your own curriculum for your own standards. Create a standards document of this is how you do keyword research. You have to train to check their work, right? Because I had my own way, because I like to do SEO and AdWords together based on competitiveness of a word. I say, look, there's so many indexed results. I encourage you to buy this word. So different strategies of how you do things, and having standards, I think, is the best way to do it. And in my past life, I was an information systems analyst at Cisco Systems, and I do documentation. Like I can create a document like that because I did it so many times. But
I might have to start hiring you, Anne, because writing stuff up is the hardest part of my job, I think.
Really? Well,
I love the analysis. I love making the recommendations. I love the client interaction. I hate writing the reports themselves, even though I'm always reasonably happy and proud of the output. It's a lot of effort for me to do that.
Yes. Making recommendations every reporting cycle.
Yeah. The thing is also, one of the reasons I went out on my own was because I became a manager at the agency I was before. I was the digital director, and we were doing reasonably well. We had like 9 people there, and it was taking over well. It could have been more profitable, but I felt we were on the right track. But I became a manager rather than a doer, and I hated it. I absolutely hated that job. I loved the people I worked with, but I hated the actual work.
I had the same experience. Sorry. I had the same experience.
And it's very hard when you love doing the doing as much as I do at the moment to then let that go and let someone else do that and become that manager, even if it's just for a single project.
But you get the pick of the litter, right? So you're like, I get this one client, and then and then you spend all your time checking everybody else's work. It's horrible.
Yeah, it is.
But it's the only way that you can scale. And so if you want to build a company that eventually has some enterprise value, which is, something I'm always thinking about. I just finished building a company and then selling it a couple of years ago. If you have no employees, then you have a job, basically, not a company.
Exactly.
So you don't have an asset that you can someday.
There's no exit strategy there.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is one of my worries, because I enjoy what I'm doing at the moment, but there is no exit plan. There is no retirement plan.
Well, and as far as having employees, I live in a very strange country called California, and we have even worse laws than you, I think. And so the last company I sold did have employees, which is one of the reasons why I sold it eventually. Probably employed about 1,000 people over the 13 years we had it. And I will never again have employees, especially not in California. And so I do everything with independent contractors. And it's a lot easier to do with content creation than it is with dev work, is what I'm finding.
I mean, it's the same problem I had when I ran that agency team. Sorry, Terry.
I said they're easy to get rid of. You just don't give them another contract. Anyone else, they go to the labor board they do that, and your life becomes
Well,
miserable.
and you don't have all the ancillary costs. Again, here in California, at least, we have workers' comp, and of course, we have state and federal payroll taxes, and unemployment is, just awful here. And so
There's a lot of administrative burden and administrative cost in having even one employee.
and liability, they can sue you for anything, and they'll probably win. And here in California, the minimum penalty is $50 per paycheck per employee, per pay period per employee, basically.
Wow.
So if you've got a couple hundred employees, like we did at various points, the liability is enormous. We had a couple hundred employees with weekly payrolls. Big liability. So
Yeah, and like you said,
now.
Tim, you end up sometimes with employees that just aren't good, and getting rid of them is
Impossible.
almost impossible. You really have to manage them out of business, and it's a pain in the ass.
Even with employment at will? Employment at will. I mean, come on. You can just let anybody go in California.
Nope.
Yeah, sure. And as a result, they can sue you for having failed to give them Kleenex at their desk.
Yeah. Remember, the United States must be crazy because it's so litigious there. I mean, any place where you can win a court case when you spilled hot coffee on yourself, you can sue the company for making coffee too hot. That's too litigious.
Well, Terry, that's why we all want to still own guns, so we can kill all the lawyers.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I do a lot of different things for my clients, and so I code, I do the SEO, I draw, I do video, I do everything. And so for me, when I will outsource, like, I can write code, but sometimes PHP gets to be a little heavy for me, and I go to Tanya, and I'll just pay her to write the code, and that's just a contract. So and then if I don't get anything to her for another year, then it's no big deal. But my business model, if I have six clients, I'm doing all right. I don't want 20 clients. I don't want to answer to 20 people.
That actually gets into a thing that's come up recently, I guess, in the dojo group about how do you charge? Do you charge on a package monthly basis? And if so, what's your minimum term? Do you charge on an hourly basis? And that's very interesting to me from a business standpoint, because
I would say retainer, right? I mean, the ideal situation is you get more of the person. So if you establish a retainer, you're kind of locking them out, other people out, so they retain your skill set, right?
And so when you talk about these terms, they all have different semantic meanings to from one person to the next. To me, a retainer means that you're available to somebody, but not that you're doing work for them. That's because I have some legal industry background, but it doesn't mean that you've got prepaid services waiting for you necessarily.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it too.
But I certainly do monthly contracts with my SEO clients, which include a bundle of services.
Yeah, I do a monthly contract with people, and I have maybe 12 services that I can provide to people, and I will give them what it is that client needs in that month. But I have a standard amount of hours that I work, and I have a 20% overrun on those hours for a specific project. If we're doing something like, we're going to go through all the keywords in their AdWords ad group, that might take more than the hours allotted for the month, and I'll do the overrun. But if it becomes an overrun every month, then we have to talk about a bigger monthly payment. And again, the monthly payment gets supposed to be paid on the first. Most of the guys do, some don't.
Yeah, I do something similar on time and allocation. I'll say, okay, here's your price. I'm going to give you 10 hours a month, say, And if they need something done this month, it's obviously going to take 14 hours. I just tell them, okay, I'm going to pull 4 hours from next month back into this month. And they're still going to pay for it on the first. They're just only going to get 60% of it next month because they already got it in advance.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I give 8 hours for the month, and I'll go up to 10 if they need it that month. Or I have 2 levels, 8 hours and 16 hours. You know, and again, if it's 16 hours, then I'll go up to 20 hours for that month, and I won't charge them any extra. But and you know, that's I decide that. You know, once they're at the 16 hours and I'm feeling pissed off with them, that's it. The rest of the project can go to next month.
Well, that's what I put on that PITA surcharge. If they're a pain in the ass,
yes,
they get a 20% bump.
Yeah, I have
That's what they call the difficult client tax, or the asshole tax, basically.
Yeah, I have a PIA tax as a pain in the ass tax. Yes, and along those lines, and I believe it was so a little bit different. And I believe this was Gina Fidel wrote me a little note about this. I think she does a lot of nonprofits. She has two clauses in her contracts that are interesting, and this is more for website development or something. Abandonment of the project. If she doesn't hear from the client for 30 days, she considers the project abandoned. And re-engagement price. So if you haven't talked to her for 30 days, then she charges an amount of money to re-engage in the project. And I'm thinking, and I'm just working with a client right now that wants his website to go live this weekend, finally. And in the last 4 months, I've had 3 phone calls from him, you know, at my prompting. And I'm like, so today you want it? Today you want it done? I'm like, oh, well, okay, write me a check for $500 and I'll do it. You know, because putting it up, it's all the email addresses and all that, and you have to do it on a weekend because you don't want to disrupt their business with the website being down, you know, all that stuff. And you know, those are considerations too.
What about minimum length of contract if you are doing contracts?
Yeah. Oh,
I want to be able to tell them I'm done today.
Yeah.
Done. That's why I have open contracts. I've never been fired, but I quit lots of jobs.
Yeah.
I have a minimum of 3 months.
Like the worst for me are clients who are not listening. If I'm telling them you want to do this and he's saying, no, do this. Yeah, at some point I just say you're wasting your time, my time and your money. I'm out of here. Like that's why I charge by the hour. Makes it real easy. It's all, and you're done.
So you aren't really on a contract in the sense of a monthly fixed amount. You're doing hourly work that's variable month to month?
For instance, I have a monthly client. They told me what they wanted the budget, and I spend that money however I see fit.
Okay. So it's a fixed amount per month, though.
Yeah. Okay. And I charge them for email, phone calls, you know, everything. If I even sit for a half an hour and think about them, I'm charging them.
What about, do you produce content for them, or you have someone else do that?
Some of that too. Like most of the off-site stuff, I don't write anything for their blog. I'm more, well, I kind of use my notoriety to get a few posts here and there.
Thin line between infamy and notoriety.
Well, you know, it has, when you've been in the business this long, I always know someone. Yeah. Like, you know, hey, you owe me, you know.
it's just as a footnote here, I will mention the fact that notoriety and notorious have the same root.
And there's a fine line between that and infamy, probably.
There you go. Famous.
There's lots of that too.
I know I put 3-month minimum in my contracts, but the last thing you ever want is you don't ever, two things. You don't ever, what Terry is saying, you tell them, you recommend they do something, and they want you to do something else, and it's not good for the project. And you don't ever want to have anybody point and say, well, he did that and it sucks. So you walk away. If a client wants to leave, you let them go. You don't ever want unhappy clients. It's not worth it.
You know what, Steve? I did that, and I've actually had them come back and say, you know what, you were right. You're brilliant, and they hire you back.
Well, that's the point.
More money too.
And
as soon as they do that, I charge them more money.
Oh yeah.
And they might listen to you.
Well, for sure. They also know your value because they worked with some other idiot who charged them more and, basically screwed everything up. Took me 6 months to fix one of them. I mean, went from top where I had it to, basically I could barely even keep the site up, let alone rank it.
Oh.
Hey,
Yeah,
Barry?
that one was pretty crazy.
To your earlier statement about trying to manage the amount of time and should you raise your prices, that's what I did several years ago. When I got so busy that I was turning into 16-hour days, I just jacked my prices up. And what I found was not only was I making more money with fewer hours, but I was still getting more clients. I went up 300% on my prices in a period of 10 months and was still seeing additional clients pop in. Now, part of that was because I started out ridiculously cheap. Okay, that was certainly a part of it. But now I've got a comfortable level, and I've got a dozen contract labor writers working for me. So I do the pieces that I want to write, and I have other people to do the other pieces. And I'm making 10 times more than I'm making, like 15 times as much myself, my cut, and they get the majority of it. When they write the piece, they get the majority of the money. So, that's what I would do. I would raise your prices.
Oh, I have.
Manage your flow that way.
I mean, for my business, this is year 4. Every year my revenue has doubled, and so has my profit, because I just keep upping the prices, and people keep saying yes. I'm in a slightly different boat than some of you are, because I want to move away from the ongoing clients where I do the whole SEO shebang for them, and focus more on what I think are my strengths, which is SEO audits, SEO strategies, and what they call strategic consulting. So be there whenever they have specific questions to help them with redesign projects, technology projects, etc. Because that's what I really enjoy doing. And all of my new business is that sort of work, especially on audits, technical audits, in-depth site audits, and strategic consulting. And I really enjoy doing that. I'm actually starting to shed my ongoing SEO clients because I don't necessarily enjoy that aspect of SEO. I'm a technology geek. I'm not a marketer. I'm not a PR person. I'm not good with content. I'm not good with links. I have people who write content for me. I have people who build links for me. I make some money off the top of that. But I don't really want more of those clients. If anything, I want fewer of those clients. I want those clients to go and talk directly to the people who source the content and the links for me, and leave me out of the loop. Yes, it'll cost me a bit of money, but it will free up the time I spend managing that retainer in the first place, so I can spend that on doing the fun things like the audits and the strategies. The downside of that is that I need that constant pipeline of new projects to come in. Because the moment people stop giving me new projects is the moment there's no recurring revenue anymore. So far, that has not been a problem. In fact, it's more the opposite. The queue is growing and growing. And now, when a new client comes on board, someone asked me today, they wanted me for a project. Great, but it'll be May, maybe even June by the time I actually get around to that. So if it's an urgent need, don't come to me. And that is with increased pricing as well. Which, it's a nice place to be in. And, I'm becoming sort of an Alan Blymice in terms of the business model. It's known for specific type of SEO service. Sorry, Terry?
Nah, never Alan Blymice. So you're much better than that.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment.
Don't take it for a compliment. That's why it's meant.
I enjoy doing it, and I have never had a client yet, touch wood, come back to me and say that they didn't feel the audit was worth the money I charged for it. But that's also why I don't want to take any shortcuts when I do them, because I see every audit as something that is important to my business. Because if I mess that up, word of mouth gets around, because that's word of mouth, and conferences are my main marketing channels as such. I don't do any marketing, I don't do any advertising. People hear about me from others, or they see me speak at conferences and read my blog posts. That's it. And then that means, every project is important. Every project is a new measure of my quality. And I have to admit, looking back to when I started to now, my audits have gotten so much better and so much more focused and value for money, I think, compared to when I started doing this as my full-time employment, basically. Because in an agency environment, you're always working with other people, you're doing different things. And like I said, I wasn't really doing the doing anymore. I was more like the evangelist of SEO and digital marketing rather than the actual doer. So then, when 4 years ago, I got my hands dirty again and got to do the doing again. It was almost a new learning experience for me. I mean, I've been doing SEO for hobby websites since 1998, 20 years now. But I've never been challenged to the level that I've been challenged over the last 4 years to improve and deliver value and make clients happy. And I enjoy that part of it. I enjoy that challenge. And every single time I send an audit, I always have this fear, this niggling feeling like, is this going to be well received? Are they going to feel this is worthwhile? And I hope I never lose that, because that keeps me sharp and that makes me want to deliver quality services for every single project, no matter how big or small the website is.
Yeah, but you've done so many. You have a lot of points that you must have a list that this is what a mental list at the very least.
Oh, I have an Excel sheet with 150 points in it.
For me, it starts, I do Screaming Frog, right, just to get the overall thing. And then I start working from there. Just out of curiosity, I'm betting that you're like me and you don't rely on audit tools to audit the code and whatnot. You're doing that all yourself.
I mean, I use a lot of tools. Of course, I use tools. Deepcore, Screaming Frog are my two favorites. But you know this as well as I do. Tools will never give you the answers. They can only point you in the right direction. Right. There's a tool that says, all right, you have too many external links. There's actually an audit I'm working on right now that said, well, all of these pages have too many external links. There's 150, 200 links to external websites on every single page, which is an easy recommendation, well, relatively easy for the tool to make. But then you have to see, right, is this actually a problem? If it is a problem, what do we need to do to fix it? Right. It turns out that because of the nature of the particular website, they had reviews for all kinds of different let's call them products on their website, and every single review had its own social sharing buttons for people to share that particular review on Facebook and Twitter. So that counts as external links. Is that a problem? Probably not. Do they want to put a no-follow tag on the social share buttons? Probably. A tool is not going to give you that answer. It just is only going to give you the high-level points, and then you have to dig into the actual website, into the context in which those errors are shown, and you then have to see what would be a ideal scenario solution to solve that, and also then formulate that in such a way that it becomes implementable for the client.
But I get that from, say, Screaming Frog will tell me that stuff. I don't have to go and use a tool like SEMrush or search metrics. You know the tools I'm talking about, Barry.
I know them all too well.
Any of those.
I mean, the tool people most underutilize in SEO is common sense. You know, nothing beats using your own bloody brain.
The term critical thinking comes to mind for some reason.
Yes, Doc, critical thinking. That's exactly it. The tools don't make you a good SEO. The tools help streamline a lot of tasks for you, but they can never make you into a good SEO. You have to do that graft the hard way.
I agree.
I remember probably, 15 years ago now, I believe it was Donna Cavalier, previously Fontenot, that I was chatting with, and I was concerned about, I was just starting to learn SEO, half decided, yes, this is something I'm going to get into. And I just asked the question, what's the best tool? It should be the one between your ears, Don't trust any tool to do anything more than gather data. And if you want to know how to use a tool properly and get something out of it, figure out what that tool can give you, and then figure out a way to go do it manually. And until you can do it yourself, the information that tool will give you, you won't fully understand it. So that's the way I taught myself. I refused to use tools until I could actually go get that information myself. I couldn't do it to scale. I couldn't do it nearly as quickly and as easily, but at least I understood what the tool was capable of delivering. And I think that, that was, for me, that worked really well. I learned a heck of a lot more that way than I would have just gone pushing buttons.
I think that's where I have competitive advantage. Is so long in the business, there were no tools. There wasn't even a way to find out keyword data.
The tool was a clipboard and a pencil.
Yeah. You started by just kind of guessing what people searched on and
ask your mother
out intent and all that stuff. It was huge. So you can't teach that. That's something that you just learn. So I have almost like instincts about things now, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong, but most of the time they're right. Like avoid anything to do with Google. So far, that's been a good path to take, which is why I haven't touched AMP. It says Google run. I don't know if that's even going to be around in 2 years. So I'm not willing to put my client into something like that.
But there are so many reasons not to touch AMP, right? How do you decide?
But that's the main one. I mean, I haven't even looked at the technology. Barry has given me more information so in that short bit he did than I had, because I didn't even bother to read up on them or know what they do, or because I knew I wasn't going to use them because it was Google. It was that the decision was that simple for me. However, the time that I would have spent reading and trying to implement AMP, I took all my clients' product pages off of WordPress, put them on Bootstrap and straight PHP, and wow. Now I have full control of the website. It runs like a charm, fast as all get out, and on mobile, all my images change by device. The code is a little bloated, but it's worth it. Just saying.
Yep.
You change your images in PHP, Terry, or do you use JavaScript?
For me, right, I've always done all my programming on the server, because when I started, JavaScript was too, there was cross-script or cross-browser scripting and all that stuff. So I just said, the easy way to avoid that is not use it. So I've always done server-side programming rather than client-side. However, I have used the built-in JavaScript in Bootstrap to validate forms, super fast, man, like, and works pretty good. So that's
there's a whole generation of developers now building websites who are coming from a software or app development background, using client-side JavaScript frameworks to build what they call websites, and that leads, of course, to a whole can of worms with crawling and indexing, because Google wants to crawl and index JavaScript content. It's getting good at it, but it's a lot of extra overhead and can cause a lot of problems with especially large, complicated websites. And these new developers have no respect for the foundational aspects of the web, like a URL, like one URL, one piece of content. For them, URLs are just, wow, we don't care about that. It's about what happens in the browser. No, it's a bit more complicated than that, guys.
not only that, all that JavaScript doesn't really work well on a reader, like on a,
it doesn't. And you also have the problem, even when Google tries to render it, it's very easy to break JavaScript compiling, so that the rendering just doesn't work. I mean, it just breaks and stuff just goes wrong, and Google ends up indexing only a part of the page or not anything on the page at all. Whereas HTML and CSS is much more forgiving. There's a lot of bad code you got to put in to break an HTML parser, whereas a JavaScript rendering engine is just one comma wrong and the whole thing falls flat on its face. It's much less forgiving and much stricter, and therefore, it's we can't avoid JavaScript. It's becoming part and parcel of the web. I do think there's a whole educational aspect that needs to happen with developers who use JavaScript frameworks, to get them to understand how the web actually works and make sure that they use JavaScript frameworks in the right context and using the right approach for building web experiences with client-side JavaScript.
Yeah. I've worked on a couple recently that were using that. Both of them were running on Windows servers.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
Seriously?
So, yeah.
Oh man.
Now, generally, that's not a problem. However, they didn't understand that, the way they were building their URLs, you could put any page. You could put any URL up and it would serve a page. The response code would be 200.
Yeah.
And it's
welcome to IIS. As a general rule, when I quote,
it's not. Hey, you're talking to a Windows developer here, Barry. Like it's not IIS. It's the people using it.
I know, but that's yes. I shouldn't blame the technology for this,
right.
But I do blame Microsoft in the wider extent, because they've harbored this impression that if you use these Visual Basic and other programming languages, you can very easily use that to build websites. I'm like, no, they're software development tools. They're not web development tools. Yeah. And because of that, it's very easy to build a website on Windows technology that isn't really a website.
No, it's a form it's a website inside of a form is what it actually is.
Having said that, probably the best, most optimized website I've ever come across was built entirely on ASP.NET. And they asked me to quote for an audit, and I took a look at the website, and then okay, let's dig a bit deeper. I spent half a day looking at this website, and then I came back to them and said, I'm not going to quote for an audit. You don't need an audit. This website is as close to perfect as you can possibly make it. Don't fix this. Keep this. This is bloody awesome. I'm going to use this as a test case on how to build great websites.
Yeah,
but most of the catastrophic clusterfucks of websites I see are built on the exact same technology. Because they're not really websites. The software apps where somebody ticked the button and out comes HTML and CSS, which then technically becomes a website. And it has all the problems that you said. Like you can put any URL string in there, so the 200 OK. There's no built-in security. You can change parameters in URLs and therefore make queries on the database, and it'll just serve up whatever the hell you want it to. And redirects, if you implement them by default 302 redirects, all those niggles and peculiarities that come with ASP.NET and similar Microsoft technologies that just don't lend themselves well to proper websites.
Yeah, kind of agree. But I never had any problems because I thought of those
You're
things.
special, Terry. You're special.
Well, yeah. Well, I also know what I'm doing too.
Exactly.
I started programming on Windows. Started Windows with Perl, believe it or not.
Oh, I remember Perl. That's the last time I actually coded anything in anger. It was Perl scripts back in 2001.
I used to love Perl.
No, it killed. It made me realize I'm not a coder.
Oh, see, that was the thing that I took to right away. I did HTML, and then the government put me through school to learn the basics of programming, and they taught us Java, JavaScript, Perl, and there's one other. Oh, Java applets. That was it. So, but the main thing there was I learned coding as a solution, not syntax, because I believe I can code in any language. All I have to do is find the documentation on the syntax, and then it's if then, knowing how to loop stuff. It's all basically the same.
Good coding is problem solving, and the syntax becomes almost irrelevant if you understand the core principles of it.
Right. I was taught to do pseudocode and all that stuff too to start. So
back in uni, I did 2 years of uni. We learned assembly. There was assembler code. Don't ever do that.
No.
You can write 17,000 lines and get a cursor to blink 3 times off of that. It's bloody awful.
But even when I was working on .NET and ASP, I never used any Microsoft products. I did it all in a text editor.
Oh yeah, that's the best way to code, man. That's how I learned. That's how I started coding my first web pages. Just Notepad. There was no syntax highlighting or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, that stuff's all nonsense anyhow. But what I did do is I was using editor that I could make all these code snippets, right? So mine was actually even better than Studio, like Visual Studio, because I could click and I'd have all of the of a personal form along with the database. Everything would all be set up. One click, boom, all the form is there. Because I just pre-built them and reused it, right? Like a contact form, those 6 fields don't change very much.
No. I think nowadays most coders are very good at copy and pasting from Stack Overflow.
Yeah. As my teacher taught me, you never start a project without going and finding out someone who's already tried to do it and just work from there.
Never reinvent the wheel, right?
Right. Because someone's always done it. Even back when I started, it was like that. You could always find something to start. Anyhow, we did do one of Dave's topics.
We did. We did several.
Still a good show. I'm really glad you showed up, Barry.
Yeah, well, I hope you do this more often, Barry. Really miss chatting with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
I'm not working for the man.
Yeah. I still work for the man. In fact, my clients are now more the man than they ever were when I was in somebody else's employment.
Yeah, I've always said people say that I want to go start my own thing because I'm tired of working for somebody else. So all you're doing is you're exchanging a boss for several bosses. All your clients are a boss, and then if you get employees, now you got a shitload of bosses.
The advantage is to an extent, especially in a micro business with like 1 or 2 people, you sort of get to choose your clients to an extent. I mean, I have fired clients, and not necessarily because they're bad people to work with. I recently let a client go who were great people to work with. Just the budget didn't lend itself to do anything interesting, and I didn't feel I could do anything worthwhile for them anymore. And sometimes you have a client and you try to filter them out fairly early on in the process where you're like, I don't think I can work with these people. It's not a good personality fit, to say it nicely. So at the moment, I'm actually lucky enough that every single client I do have, I enjoy working with, and they're good people, and it makes you want to do your best work for them as well. So yes, you have more bosses when you start your own business, but at the same time, you sort of get more control over who those bosses are. And that's a nice feeling to have, you know. And you don't have to scramble for any and every client that comes in because you've got salaries to pay and things like that. That's a risk again of scaling up the business, that you have to take on work just to make the ends meet and make sure there's enough cash flow to pay salaries. Because it's, for me, that's a very daunting prospect, to become responsible for other people's livelihoods. You know, that scares the shit out of me. Really,
responsible for someone else's family is more than I want responsible for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just, it's enough for me to be responsible for my own family.
That's it.
We're
So
coming up on the hour here.
Lucky in that you're working with mainly SEOs or corporations.
Sorry, can you repeat?
You're working with other SEOs or corporations?
50-50. I work with a lot of in-house SEOs, in-house marketing departments, marketing directors. Most of my clients are fairly bigger businesses. You know, it sort of becomes a self-filtering exercise when you scale up the cost. That, you know, the clients become bigger as a result as well.
You work with other agencies?
Once or twice, I do some white label work for agencies, but most of my work for agencies tends to be training sessions, actually, where they get me in to do technical SEO trainings for their team, so they get to scale up and become better at what they deliver for their clients. I like doing the trainings. I get a lot of satisfaction from them. You know, it always makes me evaluate what I know myself and how I can best present that. And it's affirming to a degree as well, because I was asked to do a training for a pretty big and well-respected agency in the UK not that long ago. And you sort of wonder, is there anything I can teach these people? Because they're a very good agency already, award-winning, great clients. So I went in there with a bit of trepidation, but in the course of the training, I realized that this was actually really valuable, both for me and for them, because everybody comes at it from a different angle. I've got different perspectives and different opinions about how things work. They have their own opinions and perspectives. And I think it was a really worthwhile session. They said to me, at least, they got a lot of value from it. I felt I got a lot of value from it, and also made me realize that I'm actually pretty good at this stuff, you know? I'm at least on a par with these big agencies in terms of the quality of my output, and that's nice to know too. Sometimes that you don't get you know that what you do is actually on a par with what big agencies do as well for big clients.
Yeah. I found that too. I actually found that big agencies always ain't what they seem to be. I'll just say that.
We're hitting about an hour and a half mark here. We're probably going to wrap this. We'll still run a room. What do you got coming up the next week? Ann?
Let's see. I have AdWords. There's a lot of work that I'm doing with auditing my AdWords account, because I had a few days where my cost per lead was over my threshold of $20 a lead. So I'm going in and trying to optimize it so I can get under the $19 mark.
Okay. Barry, what's on your table for the week?
I have a queue of 10 SEO audits to work through, and that will take up most of my next week. And then Thursday evening, I'm in Dublin for the Learn Inbound event. I'm emceeing that one, looking forward to that. And then on Friday, my wife and I are flying to London next week for the England v Ireland Six Nations match on Saturday afternoon, which is likely to be the championship decider. So that's going to be very exciting.
Sounds like fun. Steve?
I'm going to be doing AdWords too. I inherited an AdWords account, and I didn't choose the keywords, and I'm looking at some of the keywords that are in the account, and even though lots of searches, they really don't. They're more for consumer products, and my guy is selling industrial products, so I'm going to have to get rid of a lot of keywords out of his account, and that looks like a couple days work.
Terry?
Let me see. I'll be doing some scheme-on events and probably some programming and replacing a theme and a bunch of stuffs on a community site. So busy week. I might work maybe 15 hours.
Well, I can waste that.
You worked out, as Steve would say, for Christ, that's only 2 shifts.
That's a half a day. Okay, well, been a good chat. Enjoyed it. And great to see you in here with a microphone. Barry, always a pleasure to see you, man. We could handcuff you and keep you around for a few hours and not get tired of it. Steve, Terry, and everybody that's watching, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.